Okay, I got to break the ice a little bit. Sorry, people. Shameless. Well, good morning. I got to tell you that there hasn't been very many things in my life that have made me nervous, but this is the largest crowd I've ever spoken to, so bear with me if I stumble a little bit. It is a privilege to be able to address all of you at this time, and especially at this convention, which is, of course, the first of its kind for our church body. Together with Alan Zacharias, he and I are going to share with you what has been done so far on this thing called a purpose and priority planning process. We started this process approximately 13 months ago, and when we began, there were a lot of challenges that our church body had to deal with, and not the least of which, of course, was the fact that we had gone through, and were still in, at that time, this period of a very difficult COVID situation, which, of course, even in the process that we were following, made it quite interesting on how we would gather and how we would do the work that we were about to do. But anyway, through all of that, I think hopefully what you get out of this at the end of this presentation is that you'll have a good understanding of, as a church in convention, where we're headed and what the next steps of this process will actually look like. I got two clickers. So, if you heard terms like scarcity, lack, disorganized, apathetic, disparate, disconnected, estranged, out of touch, lack of trust, you would hardly think that these would be words used to describe a church body. Yet, over the past decade of work that I had been doing with Lutheran Foundation Canada in going through and visiting with congregations and members, these words came up a lot more often than one would like. Now, that doesn't mean that our synod was actually, that didn't describe necessarily who we were as synod, but we've all heard the term perception is reality. And so if that's how we were being described out there, that obviously created some challenges. So if I could be a bit bold in using some marketing terms, I know that's not usually what we use in the church, but in a sense, our brand and our image and our reputation, at least to some degree, needed some work in order to adjust this perception and position our church body to bring about some positive change. As we began this convention yesterday, again, the first of its kind for our synod, where we all came together, we have great opportunity. Leading up to today, and again, especially over the last 2 years, all of those challenges that we had to deal with, those obstacles that were put in front of us, they were hard, but yet we persevered. Some of those obstacles revealed that there was a need to reflect on the, quote, the way we've always done things, especially since our structure had changed, and as President Teuscher just talked about, our environment has changed. As we look to the next 4 years and beyond that, it was important to create a shared vision for our future, a vision developed from the ground up that went beyond financial limitations, laying a foundation for future strategic initiatives that aligned not only our priorities as a church, but also built plans and used our people in a very effective way that produced the mission and ministry that we want to accomplish as a synod. This is not a one-off process. It's not we are doing a report and it sits on the shelf and 4 years from now somebody looks at it. It's a work in progress that will guide the development of our church body and assist in positioning Lutheran Church Canada for mission expansion and congregation vitality. So before I go any further, just to be very clear, the purpose of this process was not to change what we believe related to our doctrine, our theology, or our confessional practices. That was not on the table. In fact, those three terms came up over and over again as we went through the process and we interviewed people and we had people come together on Zoom sessions. Those three terms were always expressed as the strength of our synod. They were not on the table to change. We developed the process, though, to identify the challenges we face today as a synod based both on some internal factors as well as some external factors. The input from all of our constituents, which included pastors and deacons and the laity from across the country, was very important. And we used this input to define what those challenges were at a grassroots level. What did people think? What did our members think? What did our pastors think? What did our deacons think the problems were, the challenges that we faced? And then we brought people forward to further define and discuss those problems and develop how we might approach the solutions to deal with them. Now, without sounding naive, we wanted the process to be as positive as possible. We definitely have so many passionate people within our church body that understand who we are as a church. We have opportunity because of who we are as a church. And if you think about, it's not uncommon for me to be in front of a congregation, and one of the things that is brought up over and over and over again is, gosh, we're getting older. Well, yeah, I mean, we are. Every day. But if you were to sit down with some of our young people, I'm not exactly sure where we define young these days, maybe it's under 50. But if you were to sit down with some of our young people, and there are young people here in this room, and ask them what they were passionate about in their church, you might be surprised. So, as much as we have some of these challenges, we also have the tremendous strengths that we can build upon. We live in a country with untold abundance and yet in desperate need of the great news of the gospel. And we have ample possibility and promise to fulfill our mission as a church. Yeah, it was probably pretty good in the 50s. That was before my time. But that's not our reality today. So creating a vision for our future that is meaningful, hopeful, intentional, I like that word, intentional and purposeful, will provide the foundation for many synodical decisions to come. So one might ask, why undertake this task? There are, of course, both short and long-term implications of any good plan. And at a high level, there were two major reasons we began this. Number one, to help direct our overall mission and ministry. What does that look like? And number two, to strengthen and sustain that mission and ministry, not just today and tomorrow, but well into the future. So what do we desire? Well, to help Lutheran Church Canada identify the work and work through these critical issues and begin to shape a positive future for our church body, the board of directors retained the services of Zacharias Advancement Consulting, and Alan, who you will hear from shortly, worked with the Purpose and Priorities Planning leadership team that was co-chaired by Arnold Drung and Cam Pelzer. There was a committee that we put together after a number of things that we did, which again we'll elaborate on shortly. And that committee came together to discuss and define a number of things. And it was such a joy to be able to work with this cross-section of our church body. But the charge was to accomplish the following: bring clarity of our mission priorities, create efficacy in our initiatives, establish greater appreciation of walking together as synod, enrich the sense of unity across our synod. That word unity came up over and over again. Enhance the way we communicate and guide our funding priorities. If I may, Alan, we'll talk about how we went through this process, what we found in this process, and then what some of the outcomes were.
Thank you, David. President Teuscher, Lutheran Church Canada in convention, delegates, dignitaries, and friends, it's a pleasure to be in your midst, in your fellowship this weekend for this convention. A lot of work has gone into what David began telling about, and it will be my pleasure, as he said, to share with you the approach that is being taken to effect a positive change for the future of the church. One of the first decisions that any organization that is desiring to effect change is to determine to what extent are we wanting to engage people in this conversation. There are some organizations, and I dare say Lutheran Church Canada could have created a wonderful strategic plan, as it were, by bringing the board of directors together, or even just the leadership team of the office in Winnipeg, and sitting down and hammering out a plan. We probably could have developed a pretty good plan. But we know that plans that don't engage conversation, that don't involve a lot of voices and gain input and insights, are not likely to affect the desired change. In fact, they are going to be stymied almost at every turn. As witnessed by Rosabeth Moss-Cantor, change is debilitating when done to us, but exhilarating when done by us. That is a concept that we adopted early on in this process. The steps that were taken to engage this were four. The first were formative interviews. The second, every congregation online survey. What we called focused leadership events. And finally, a strategic retreat. And again, throughout this entire process, the desire was to get a good cross-section demographically, from regions, among age groups, among races, representative of the church and of our societies, the communities that we live in, to hear voices and feed into the process. So the formative interviews were the first of this step. This involved me, frankly, sitting down with a number of people, 35 confidential one-on-one interviews, to ask pointed questions about hopes and dreams, assessments of what's working well, what's not working well. And again, this was among pastors, church leaders, lay people, older folks, younger folks, again, to get a good feel for what are the critical issues facing Lutheran Church Canada. The second was to take that information and design an online survey that went out to the broader church. 242 surveys were returned from this effort alone. This went out to every pastor of Lutheran Church Canada and deacons. It went out to one layperson, at least one layperson, lay leader from each congregation. And again, asking similar questions, getting to this question of what are the critical issues that must be dealt with in this plan. These conversations were rich in content and insights and laid the groundwork for greater participation. The clear theme that emerged from these focused leadership events was pursue growth while adhering to Lutheran theology, strong doctrine, and confessions. As David said, this has never been on the table, and I'm proud of that. The next step was the in-person retreat. This was an extraordinary weekend that was held back in March. We scheduled it for a time when we thought we would have lovely spring weather. In fact, it was more like a blizzard, but the warmth and the energy inside of the Holiday Inn in Winnipeg was extraordinary. This brought together 32 people from across Canada, from each of the regions, 6 pastors, 2 deacons, 18 laity. This involved LCC leadership and all of the members of the board that were able to attend. There was also virtual participation as well. It was a facilitated large group discussion and small groups as well. This was, the retreat itself dealt with very difficult issues that you are all aware of that have happened within Lutheran Church Canada over the last 7 years. Not to mention the change that has occurred with the structure, which has been greeted mostly positively, but that represents change nonetheless. But what that open, honest, candid conversation where voices were allowed to be heard, what that produced was a positive environment of collaboration, creativity, and a desire to change. You can see from the comment here, what struck me about this was I've been at many conventions and meetings where differences of opinion have been met with argument, sometimes heated and overly critical. The absence of that kind of response was a blessing. Another comment from the retreat was from someone who has had very little, a young person who's had very little to do with, not been engaged much with conversations within the church. If this retreat is a fair depiction of how most synod-level retreats and meetings are run, then I'm eager to participate more in the future. It was a pleasant experience. In fact, these kinds of comments have been heard throughout this effort. And again, it is with one of the aims of the early findings of the formative interviews and beyond that, was this desire for unity and a desire to acknowledge the challenges that face us, but really approach the future with a spirit of positivity and collaboration. So quickly, what were the findings that came out of all of these? When I said that we had frank and candid conversation at the retreat, I would say that's true for each step of this process. We're all familiar with SWOT, Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Strengths and weaknesses are internal things that we can control if we desire to change things, whereas opportunities and threats is the environment in which we operate. We can't affect change in these items, but we need to be aware of them. So the issues that came forth out of this was quite clear in terms of what was viewed as the strengths of Lutheran Church Canada. Again, doctrine, the Lutheran confessions, the sense of family within the church, the high regard that clergy and the diaconate are held, the strong fellowship, the weaknesses of aging demographics, again, that we're all aware of, financial transparency issues that have beset the church, especially in recent years, a lack of resources, lack of communication, and a lack of unity due to geographics and just lack of talking to one another. However, there was positivity in terms of the opportunity, the fact that we have the world coming to Canada in the form of immigrants, and the opportunity to share the gospel with new peoples that are here, not to mention those that have lived in Canada for decades, their family. It is an opportunity to reach young people who, especially through COVID, felt disaffected and distanced. The desire for individuals to engage in works of mercy. And of course, the threats that we all acknowledge that exist in the environment in the form of government regulation and oversight, the squelching of Christian thought, of confessional Christian thought and comments on issues of the day, indifference in society, all of the things that President Teuscher so eloquently discussed in his essay. So the needs assessment were very clear, clarified that is, through all of these steps, from the formative interviews to the focused leadership events to the online survey, through the retreat, clarify the role, function, and resources provided by Lutheran Church Canada, improve communications and transparency, provide laity training and catechesis and resources to do so, promote unity at the synodical level, provide better engagement, support, and resources for struggling congregations, catechesis and training for new immigrants to Canada, technology support for local congregations, and creation of Lutheran Church Canada education resources for all ages. What all of these things boiled up to was a distillation of the critical issues. Now, these critical issues that I'm going to present here, you will see also reflected in the goal statements that David will review here in a moment. Because everything that was heard leads up to this point. That is, what are the critical issues that the Purpose and Priorities Plan must deal with effectively? The first was a church-wide approach and plan that aligns resources and builds unity. There is a desire among everyone we talk to for a clarity, crystal clarity of mission and vision, the values that guide our work, and the desired outcomes that we're all striving for. Where there is no vision, the people perish, Proverbs tells us. And that's true in life, it's true in organizational life. The vision for Lutheran Church Canada is something that is desired by the people that we talked with. Program, training, and resources support for congregations of all sizes and locations. There are a number of large, very prosperous, thriving congregations in Lutheran Church Canada. There are some in the middle who are doing okay, are hanging on, are holding their own, if you will. But there is a portion that are struggling, that find it difficult to afford a full-time pastor, that don't know how they can provide resources for their members, even in the form of regular worship. So the desire for supports and resources for congregations of all sizes, types, and circumstances. A communication strategy to build awareness and engagement. Every planning process, I've done scores of these, and I have to tell you, communications is always an issue that arises. But I think this is a true opportunity for Lutheran Church Canada because there is a desire, a stated desire for people to be in fellowship, to talk with one another, to feel a sense of unity. Communications is imperative in this. And maintaining the type of open, candid, honest, safe conversations that we had, that I referred to during the retreat, is an imperative for the work that we do together going forward. 4, review and improve synodical structure and relationships to promote financial and leadership transparency. Again, overwhelmingly, people are positive about the structure change that occurred in Lutheran Church Canada, but it hasn't been fully implemented. It requires some additional fine-tuning. It requires greater input and resources for it to be fully realized, the potential of it to be fully realized. This is another critical issue. Expand pastoral formation options, enhance pastoral and church recruitment efforts, and streamline the call process. I know there's a lot bundled in that statement, and it's a loaded one to a degree, but this is clearly an issue that has arisen over and over, and the people of Lutheran Church Canada are asking that it be dealt with in an effective way that serves congregations. Perhaps the most important finding of all of this is what my firm found was true throughout all of the conversations that we've had in the data that has been gathered, that there is a strong desire to see Lutheran Church Canada expand, grow, and sustain a theologically sound ministry which reaches throughout Canada and the world. That is my prayer for you. David Friesen is now going to share with you the strategic framework and the next steps in the process.
Thanks, Alan. Well, is there more tech group? Too far. That's me. So the culmination of all the work that we have done so far, and I say so far because this, of course, isn't the end of the process, was to develop this strategic framework, the results of which were greatly influenced not just by the retreat and the input that we had of those 32 people coming together, but also taking into consideration those initial interviews, the survey results, and the focused leadership events. By the way, Alan talked a little bit about these virtual events. Some of those things were supposed to be done in person, but because we could not travel, we could not get together, I think that this, in fact, was one of the first times that Alan had to do all of these things via Zoom. And as much as we are tired of that environment, perhaps, it was quite useful in conversation and in bringing up ideas and thought processes and so forth. The primary purpose of a good framework is to answer the following questions. Who are we, or why do we exist? What do we wish to become? What do we value? What are our priorities? The answers to these clarify that mission, vision, values, and then the most important goals as they are right now. That doesn't mean that those goals won't change over time, but right now that's what we are focused on and into the near future. So the creation of this strategic plan, again, as I said, was not the end of the process, but rather the foundation from which everything else gets built upon. And it will help guide the direction of decisions, both today and tomorrow, and ensure that the initiatives that we do undertake as a church fit into the framework of what's most important. So, if you think about a framework like a funnel, you can see that as ideas and proposals and opportunities and whatever is suggested from you, the people, from our congregations, and from the board, and from the synod leadership, they go in the top, and not every one of them goes down and comes out the bottom. If you think about it as a funnel with a sieve at each level, you can see how something might enter, but it doesn't quite even make it to the next step. Or maybe it goes through 2, or maybe it goes through 3. You get the picture. At the very top of the funnel is our mission statement, which we spent a fair amount of time on. Now, LCC does have a current mission statement, but we worked through that to determine if that was exactly what we wanted to have moving forward. That mission statement, in essence, is who we are. It's a starting point from which the rest of the plan cascades, and it's quite a broad sieve at the beginning. And so as those ideas and proposals and opportunities, initiatives enter the funnel, we can decide whether they actually speak to who we are as a church today. Next, in that funnel is vision, which describes what we aspire to become, or, in other words, how we want the outside world to view us. Using that same example, as those initiatives come in, those ideas come in, do they actually help us achieve that vision or desired state? The third level, the funnel starts to narrow a little bit. It gets to our values. These are the key ideals within our church body, within our organization, that we hold sacred and non-negotiable. This was a really interesting part of the exercise. And then the final step, that final stage of the funnel, is goals, where it narrows even further, and those ideas and proposals and opportunities must speak to the priorities as established by the board, and that help us get to where we want to be. So the first element is that mission statement. It's the most often used. It's the one that, of course, we should all know. We should memorize. It should be memorable. If somebody says, "Who is Lutheran Church Canada?" we can make this statement. It establishes our purpose. It serves to assess the fit of ideas that we take on as a church body. And it describes why we exist, not how we do the work. So LCC's mission statement, as we move forward, is to serve, strengthen, and equip congregations for bold, faithful, Christ-centered witness. The wording of your mission statement is very important, and we spent a lot of time deciding which words really did describe who we were. In the end, Lutheran Church Canada exists to serve congregations so that in turn they can build up their members to boldly serve their neighbors. A vision statement, as I said just a few minutes ago, describes the organization we aspire to become. And when we asked our people about the church they wish to see in the future, this statement is really an encapsulation of everything that they talked about and a direct reflection of this essence that they shared. The concepts that we heard over and over again, important concepts, the desire for unity in LCC, that we remain a confessional Lutheran body, that as congregations we work together to share the gospel and bring it out to not only the people in our country, but around the world. LCC's vision statement going forward: a unified confessional body of believers fulfilling the Great Commission. If you recall the funnel, as we move through mission and vision, we get to this place called values. And remember, these values are the inviolate ideas of LCC. They define how we operate, they inform our decisions, and they create our identity within not only our own constituents, but how we present ourselves to the world as well. Now, when we did this in the retreat, really interesting exercise. We probably had over 30 words that were discussed. Some were very similar to each other. And at the end, we distilled them down together. We came up with these next 7 that I'm going to go through. And I'm simply going to read them. And of course, as I said earlier, if you have questions, not only about the whole process, but how we came to these things and some of the goal statements that are coming up, come to one of our sessions that we're having this afternoon. Oh, sorry, I should read that one. Value 1, truth. We value Scripture as the inerrant written Word of God and the only rule and norm of faith and practice. Value 2, grace. We value grace as the free and undeserved gift of God through Christ Jesus, which empowers believers to show forgiveness and mercy to others. Value 3, unity. We value unity in doctrine, proclamation, and practice as expressed in Scripture and the Lutheran confessions. Vocation. We value each person's unique God-given gifts, talents, and abilities, enabling them to witness Christ's redeeming love in all aspects and stations of life. Sanctity of life. We value life as a gift of God to be cherished, nurtured, and protected from conception to natural death. Value 6, trust. We value telling one another the truth in love, doing what we say we will do, and stewarding all ministry resources to the glory of God. And value 7, relationships. We value and respect one another as children of God, demonstrating love in all things because He first loved us. So in summary, truth, grace, unity, vocation, sanctity of life, trust, and relationships. These are the elements that set our church body apart from other Lutheran counterparts and most mainline denominations. This is what makes us unique. You won't find all of these values anywhere else. And for that, I think we can be proud. A moment ago, Alan referred to the critical issues facing Lutheran Church Canada. The goal statements that I am about to share with you and speak to briefly are a reflection of those critical issues and provide a response to overcoming them. Now keep in mind, these are goal statements. They're not, in fact, everything that comes under those goal statements, which are initiatives, and again, we'll talk about that at the breakout session this afternoon. So going back to the funnel, this is a stage that as ideas come in, they might make it through mission, vision, and values, but they may not help us achieve our strategic priorities. In other words, these goals are meant to keep us focused, to achieve the greatest return on the work and the resources we are devoting to the mission and ministry of Lutheran Church Canada. Disciple-making culture is truly a reflection of our mission statement and why we exist. And therefore, goal number 1, disciple-making culture, is to serve, support, and equip congregations and partner ministries for mission and discipleship. A central reason why synod exists is to do the work together, that we cannot do as effectively on our own. And this is especially true in the area of missions. So goal number 2 is mission outreach. Pursue bold domestic and international outreach and ministry. Remember, there will be lots of things that come in underneath this goal statement. The growing clergy shortage facing our congregations and the financial realities of many of our congregations requires a fresh look at our church worker recruitment and formation. Therefore, goal number 3 is equip leaders. Recruit, educate, and support ecclesiastical, diaconal, and lay leaders for the church. 4 years ago, the new restructuring was adopted. Our research shows that most consider the restructuring to have been a success in terms of what it was meant to accomplish. But that said, of course, the use of the structure and the fine-tuning of the processes is a work in progress. And as Alan pointed out, there's still some stuff to be done. So therefore, goal number 4 refers to organizational effectiveness. And it says, use and strengthen synodical structure, services, and processes to foster unity, transparency, and relationships. Funding the mission of our church and optimizing the use of our resources today and tomorrow and into the future is a key responsibility of synod. It doesn't fall on one person or 5 people or the Winnipeg office. It is a synodical responsibility. One of the initiatives that already came up through this process that was voiced many different times was the importance of supporting the mission work that we do. And in that nature, how do we do that? So therefore, goal number 5 is focused on fiscal resources and responsibility. To gather, manage, and allocate financial resources to increase and optimize mission impact. It is all about the work that we do together. And finally, creating a culture of two-way communications is a key component of this plan. The phrase two-way communications is important. So cultivate open, consistent communications to inform, engage, and encourage awareness and response throughout the synodical family. So what does this all mean? So the last 35 minutes or so, we've shared with you the foundational elements of the Purpose and Priorities plan. Again, there's more work to be done. With great care and thoroughness, this process listened to many voices. That was the most significant thing. How do you gather the information and hear and listen to the people that form the actual church? We gathered all of this data, we looked at the trends, we identified the needs and wants, and when I say we, I mean we. The wants of congregations, and laid the groundwork for future strategic initiatives. What you have just seen and heard again is not the end of this process. And at the beginning, I used the phrase, we're not in the 1950s anymore. And as great of a time as that might have been, we are faced with different challenges and hurdles today. The world has changed, our attitudes, or the attitudes, I should say, towards the church and religion have changed. And in some cases, even our families have changed. But the one thing that hasn't changed is the need for confessional word and sacrament ministry and the proclamation of the gospel, especially in our own backyard. Yesterday, as I watched people come into this convention, you could feel the buzz of excitement I mean, we have been away from each other for so long. And the fact that we have representation from so many of our congregations, not quite all, but so many of them, is such a wonderful thing. Being together as one. If you recall that magazine that was put together back last year called Together One. Everyone has a role in that. Everyone has a role in that. So to begin with, the one thing that you can do is to lift up the result of this work and the forthcoming plans and initiatives that come out of it, both in your individual and in your congregational petitions. In other words, pray for your church. If you have opportunity to participate, if you're asked to participate in some form of this continuing process, consider doing it. Speak to the people that have already been involved. And of course, be on the lookout for additional information about how you can support this Together One initiative through your time, talents, and treasures. Alan, do you have anything else to add?
No, again, as I shared with you, I have facilitated scores of strategic planning efforts. And the thing that most enthuses me about the work that you are doing here in Lutheran Church Canada is really the unity, the desire for unity. In the strategic framework, the values that David walked through, oftentimes those get short shrift. Everyone's interested in mission and vision and the goals. And the values kind of get pushed to the side and say, yeah, that's nice. Those are all nice. But I guess what I'm most impressed by is the values reflect the unique nature, the unique DNA of Lutheran Church Canada. And it's helpful to realize that we are among a handful of church bodies in the world that have a strong set of values like the ones that the board has adopted. And that, in my mind, is not only a guiding light for the church. You referred to the brand, the Lutheran Church Canada brand. And I know perhaps that's language that is not often used, but as we build an image of Lutheran Church Canada and project to the world who we are, the impact we desire to make, what we believe in, those values are going to be the surest way to do so. That is, in summary, the Lutheran Church Canada brand. That's what excites me.
Thanks, Alan. So as I said, if you have questions, I'm sure you have some questions. We have 2 identical sessions. Well, they may not be identical depending on the questions, but 2 sessions this afternoon that you can attend. If you're already attending other sessions, don't worry about it. You can call, text, email me almost any time, and I'd be happy to either provide answers or find the answers if I don't know them. And finally, invite me out to your church. And I'd love to come speak to your congregation, to you individually as pastors. The end result is we want a cohesive front for who we are as a church in order that this important work that we do and continue to do gets done. So I thank you. There was a thank you slide, but it just says thank you. Thank you.